Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for EarthEcho's STEMExplore Virtual Career Connection featuring Daniela Escontrela. She is a PhD student of marine biology at the University of Hawaii in Honolulu. Welcome to everyone tuning in. My name is Casey, Programs Manager at EarthEcho International, and we're so excited to have students joining us from all over the globe to learn about exciting and sustainable careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. This live event is part of STEMExplore, EarthEcho's program that brings inspiration to life by telling the stories of dynamic female professionals in STEM careers during live virtual career connections. We want to thank our founding sponsor, United Technologies, for their support of women in STEM. Here at EarthEcho, we believe that youth have the power to change the planet. Visit www.earthecho.org to learn more about our programs, and you can also access resources like STEMexplore's career profile videos, as well as tune in for upcoming live events just like this one. I'd like to recognize and thank STEMexplore's partner sites across the nation and recognize some interactive sites that are joining us today. So we do have two classrooms joining us today live from Sarasota, Florida, from Riverview High School. So let's head over to Miss Catherine's class. Catherine, why don't we get your students to give us a little hello this morning? Good morning, Riverview. Wonderful to see you. All right, let's hop on over to Miss Sharon's class out there at Riverview High School. How are you all doing this morning? Wonderful to see you. We're so excited to have you joining us today, and we think that you will really like today's presentation from Danny in Hawaii. It was right up your alley with marine science. So for those of you who are tuning in to our live streams or on this Zoom meeting, just a reminder that you all can send in questions for our STEM expert via chat, and we will break throughout today's presentation a few times to see if you do have any questions for us. Feel free to start typing in questions into the chat space on YouTube or in this Zoom feed, and we'll be sure to answer those as we go along. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I want to welcome our special guest for today's EarthEcho STEMexplore Virtual Career Connection, Danny. Greetings, Danny, or should I say aloha?
Aloha, good morning.
Wonderful to see you this morning. Is the sun up yet in Hawaii?
No, but you might get to see it behind me as the presentation goes on.
All right, wonderful. We might get to see a sunrise. So Daniela Escontrela has lived close to the coastline most of her life. She was born in Venezuela, and she is always within a few hours of the beach and remembers frequently weekend and summer getaways where she got to explore the coastlines and marine life. Ultimately, she fell in love with the underwater world. When she moved to Florida, those adventures continued, and at the young age of 13, Danny was introduced to one of her passions, scuba diving. She started college at the University of Miami in 2011, where she became involved with the Shark Research Laboratory and continued her diving profession. Danny studied abroad in the Galapagos, where she conducted various field projects for her classes and volunteered at a tortoise breeding center. After graduating, she then moved to Belize, where she worked for over a year for a non-governmental organization, Blue Ventures, as a field scientist. After finishing her time in Belize, Danny then moved to the Philippines, where she served as a U.S. Peace Corps Coastal Resource Manager for over 2 years. There, she worked with teachers and fishermen to teach them about environmental conservation and ways to better manage their resources. Now, once that Peace Corps time came to a close, she moved to Washington, D.C., where she worked for a philanthropic institute, the Summit Foundation. And we're going to learn all about Danny's adventures because, believe me, there's a longer list than this. Currently, she is at the University of Hawaii, where she has just started her first year of her PhD program and where she will be studying reef fishes and Hawaii's coral reefs. So Danny, let's go ahead and get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about where you're at and what you are currently doing?
All right. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm currently in Hawaii, which is where that little orange globe is on the map. It's actually the most remote islands on the world. So I'm out here in the middle of the Pacific. And so my latest adventure involved coming back to school. I recently got a National Science Foundation fellowship to go back to get my PhD in marine biology. And so I'm just getting started. I only moved here 2 months ago. So I'm really just kind of getting my bearings, learning to be a student again, because I haven't been in school for 4 years. So I go to classes, I read a lot, lots and lots and lots of reading. And I've started to also go diving with my lab just to see our research sites so I can figure out what I want to do for my research projects. So that's where I am right now.
Excellent. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about some of your adventures? In fact, why don't we just start with where you grew up? We heard that you've had a passion for the ocean since you were young. So can you tell us a little bit more about where you're from and your journey into marine science? Because we know it did start early.
Yeah, so let me take you back through time. I am from Venezuela originally, which is in South America. I was born there and I lived there for the first 10 years of my life. Growing up, I used to go to the beach a lot. We were only about 2 hours from the ocean. So on weekends and holidays, we would go swimming and snorkeling. And I always remember being interested in the underwater world. It was, I always wanted to see the little creatures. I always found shells in the sand. I remember this place we would go to that you could kind of see into the water on all the different fishes, and we would go fishing too. And I'd get really excited when we got, a new animal that I hadn't seen before. So it's always been kind of this passion that I've had. But when I was young, I didn't know that you could spend your life doing, exploring the underwater world. So then when I was about 9 years old, my parents told me we were moving to the United States. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant. I actually thought we were moving to Disney at first, which was kind of weird. But we didn't move to Disney. We did move to Florida, though. We moved to Weston, which is about an hour north of Miami. It's actually pretty close to Sarasota. And when we moved there, we actually ended up being so much closer to the beach. We were only like 30 minutes away, and that meant we got to go to the beach more. And so I remember one time we were there and this guy was looking through these little clumps of algae. He would shake them and all these little shrimp and fish would fall out. And I became so interested because these little clumps of algae that looked like they had nothing in them had all this life in it. And that's kind of like how the ocean is. It's all blue and you don't know what's there. And then you get underneath and there's just so much life. So I was just instantly, I always wanted to see what was underneath. And so when I was 13, my parents and I went on a vacation to Turks and Caicos, which are these islands in the Caribbean Ocean. And when we were there, I saw these people breathing in the pool with scuba gear. And I was like, oh my God, I really want to do that because then I can see what's underneath. I've always snorkeled, but I want to get close to the underwater world. So my parents got me to do a Discover Scuba, which is a 1-day course just to see if I liked it and if I wasn't scared. And I went underneath. And it was so amazing just getting to breathe underwater, just something that we shouldn't be able to do. But here I was breathing underwater. And then just the feeling of weightlessness. I kind of felt like an astronaut, when they're like walking on the moon and you can kind of do that underwater. And I saw all these animals. I saw turtles and sharks and fish. I saw a huge barracuda. And I actually found these pictures recently of my first dive. And I remember I took them, we didn't have, digital cameras. So I took them with one of those disposable ones. I don't know if anyone's ever used one of those, but you wind it and then you take a picture and that's it. You can't really see it, but I got some stuff. So that was exciting. And so a few years went by and I kind of honestly forgot a little bit that I had the certification because it is an expensive sport. So I didn't do it. I would do it kind of on vacation when we went, to other places. And eventually, you know, I went to high school and all that, and I decided that I wanted to do marine biology. And so I enrolled at University of Miami. And right before starting school, I did my dive master certification. And then a year into school, I did my instructor. So I learned how to teach people how to scuba dive, which was really exciting because I was getting to share this underwater world with other people. And a lot of times people would be a little bit scared when they first got in the water. And it was exciting to see them go from being a little bit scared to just being so excited to see the underwater world that they just forgot, you know, that they were scared. And so throughout college, I worked as a dive instructor at a dive shop, which was great because one of the things that I've always had kind of a shy personality, and this was a really good experience for me because it really got me to come out of my shell, put myself in situations that I otherwise would, like, you know, talking to new people, leading people. So it really helped me with my leadership skills. And of course, it was really important because as a marine biologist, it gave me this platform to just constantly be underwater and see what was out there and look at animals and look how they were behaving. So something else that I did while I was in school is I was part of the shark research lab at the University of Miami. So basically, we would go out and kind of go fishing. We would catch sharks to take samples from them. So things like muscle biopsies and blood. And well, for one thing, it got me really passionate about sharks. And it also taught me a lot of different skills, field research skills that I normally wouldn't be able to learn in a classroom. So I learned things like how to bait hooks, how to collect data, how to tie knots, just like things that you really wouldn't do in a classroom. So that was a really important experience. And it also really allowed me to develop my leadership skills too, because we would take schools out and citizen scientists and teach them about the science that we were doing. And this was also a really good experience because it taught me about the importance of sharing science with the community. And that's kind of where also my passion for sharing science started to develop. And I did other activities too while I was in school. I tried to be involved and do a lot of things outside the classroom, even if they weren't marine related, because I thought it was important to get that kind of, you know, dip my feet into different activities. So I volunteered with sea turtles in Fort Lauderdale, and I did an Ocean Awareness Week event for my school. And I even volunteered for the elections in Venezuela. Like we went to New Orleans and helped with the voting process. So all sorts of things that sometimes didn't even have to do with marine biology. And the kind of the last important thing that I did in while I was in college is that I studied abroad in the Galapagos. And this is just such an amazing opportunity. This is the birthplace of evolution. This is where Charles Darwin went. So it was really exciting for me. And it's such a magical place. You can be snorkeling and there's a sea lion right there in your face, or you're in a school of manta rays. It's probably one of my favorite places. And I got to take classes, and I got to do some projects for my classes, and I even got to volunteer at the Tortoise Breeding Center, which was really exciting. And then the one of the big things that I did, or that really impacted me when I was there, is that my host dad used to be a shark fisherman before I got there, because there were and he wasn't anymore because they put policies in place so you couldn't fish sharks anymore. And that was really impactful for me, because here I was, someone that studied sharks in school, and I was talking to someone that fished them. And when I used to do this research, I was like, save the sharks, save the sharks. But I never really thought about the human component and what these things meant. And so it was really important for me to make that connection between science and policy and how it affected people. You know, if you don't have alternatives, it's really hard. So this was kind of also a moment when I started to see the importance of doing science, but also working with the community to make sure that they're not negatively impacted by those decisions that you make. So that was college, and then eventually I graduated, which was really exciting. I took classes and I did a lot of extracurricular activities. So I feel like I had a really good college experience, and that really set me up for the future, for jobs and other training in the future.
Danny,
So,
I want to interrupt you for just a
yeah.
second because this photograph, can you speak to this
Oh, yes.
photograph and what exactly this is? I know what this is, but
Yeah.
I think our viewers would be pretty interested in learning what this animal is and a little bit about it, and even that experience of you swimming with one.
Yeah, this is probably actually one of my favorite dives. Well, there's been a lot of good ones, but this is an ocean sunfish, or a mola mola, and I had always wanted to see one. And we were in this dive that was known for the hammerheads, scallop hammerheads that were in
Yes.
the area. So I mean, Galapagos is amazing. There's stuff all around you. So we had like a sea lion to one side, or Galapagos shark, a hammerhead, and all of a sudden, out of the shadows, I see this fish coming, and I just take off swimming after it. And it's this mola mola, which is huge. You can see from the picture, it's about the size of my body, and everyone just kind of like went, to see it. And it just kind of swam in front of my face, and it was so exciting. I always wanted to see one. And here I
That's
was,
amazing.
I was like picking what to choose. I'm like, do I look at the hammerheads? Do I look at this mola mola? Like, I don't know. It was really exciting.
That is truly incredible. And if
Yeah.
memory serves me correctly, mola molas they're the largest bony fish, I do believe, and
Hmm.
they can grow to be 11 feet, I believe. And they have this weird little mouth and they love to eat jellies.
Oh, yes, they have.
So
It kind of goes like, it's hard to explain. It's like it goes up and down. It came really close, so I got to see it up close, but I can't really imitate it very well.
all right, so let's go ahead and talk about kind of how you wrapped up your college years.
Yeah, so right at the end, of course, it was I started to apply for jobs, and kind of close out all those things I had done in college, which meant, I finished my job at the dive shop, I finished my time with the shark research lab, um, and just kind of passing on that information to other people so they could take on after I left.
Wonderful. So now we have a good basis of the kind of where you grew up and how your passion for marine science was instilled in you. So we've laid some nice groundwork, and you've had a lot of experience at this point up until just graduating from college. So I just want to pause here, and I want to remind folks out there that they can chat in questions for Danny. And I want to actually go to two of our video interactive sites at Riverview High School, and we're going to take some questions from each of the classrooms. So why don't we start off with Miss Sharon's class at Riverview High School in Sarasota, Florida. What questions do you have for Danny at this point?
You did? Okay, great. Ellie, go for it. Yeah. Okay. What was the shark research for? What was the shark research for?
Good question.
Hey, nice question. Yeah, so the shark research, we did a couple things. Sometimes we put satellite tags on the sharks so we could see their movements. One of the studies that they did while I was there was trying to figure out how stressed sharks got when you caught them. So we would put these things called accelerometers on the line, which would tell you how long the shark had been on the line. And then we would also collect blood from the sharks. So we were able to correlate the time that they were on the line to how stressed they were. And you measure the stress from the blood, basically looking at their lactic acid buildup. So that was one of the big things. And then for me, I actually got to use some of the data for my senior thesis project. And I looked at morphology, so based body condition, seeing how healthy sharks were depending on location. And I looked at sharks that were not migratory, so things like lemon sharks and black tips. So seeing in the different areas, for example, the Miami Reef or Key Biscayne, Everglades, and the Keys Reef, because those were kind of the four sites that we used to go fishing at.
Awesome. Awesome question. All right, Ms. Sharon's class, do we have another question? And then we'll pop over to Ms. Katrin's class.
Can we see the research paper?
Oh, can you see the research paper? Is it published, Danny?
The one about the shark stress is, mine was just my senior thesis project, but I'd be happy to share that if anyone wanted to read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was
if you
right
want
at
to
the
email
beginning.
that to me.
Yeah, it was right at the beginning, so it's not, it was a work in progress.
Awesome. And if you want to email that to me, I can definitely pass that along. That's great. I love that you guys want to see the research paper. That's awesome. All right, we'll come back to you in Miss Sherry's class. Let's hop over to Katrin's class right now and see if they have any questions for Danny.
Okay, so what was one of your craziest diving experiences?
Oh, craziest diving experience. Well, I went after I guess I'll get into, I won't get into this as much, but after I finished my time in the Philippines with the Peace Corps, I decided to travel around Southeast Asia for a little bit because I was there, so why not, And one of the places I went to was Borneo, and there was this one dive that I really wanted to do. It was called Siparan, and you had to usually sign up months in advance, but I didn't do it because I just didn't think about it. And fortunately, I found a dive shop that was able to take me and my friend out, and it was just amazing. It was the best coral reef I've ever seen. There was a tornado of barracuda just swimming above us, a huge school of jack, these huge, I've never seen parrotfish so big, just bigger than me, huge parrotfish just on the reef, eating the algae, sharks, groupers, turtles. There was just so many things. It was amazing. It was a beautiful reef, yeah.
That is incredible. Wow. All right, Ms. Katrin's class, do we have another question?
Go ahead.
I think we're okay for right now, but as they come up, we'll make sure to keep them ready.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, everything is going smoothly. And again, those folks out there that are joining the live streams, we know we have a lot of classrooms watching. You can actually chat those questions into YouTube, so feel free to add those into the chat space. Or if you're here in the Zoom meeting with us, feel free to add them into the chat space there, and we'll make sure to have Danny answer those questions. So Danny, let's continue on your journey.
Sweet. So yeah. So as I said, as I was finishing up my time in college, I started to apply for jobs because I really wanted to. I don't like sitting still. I like to always be doing something. So I wanted to make sure I had something lined up for after school. So I started to apply to jobs, and I wanted to do something that included science, but also that worked with the community. So I applied for jobs, and eventually I got a job with Blue Ventures in Belize. And I moved there about a week after my graduation. And so what I did there basically is I trained volunteers that came out on fish identification, coral, shark, turtle, bird, so I taught them how to identify all these animals. And then we would actually go out and do surveys. So we did reef surveys, bird surveys, manatee surveys, a bunch of surveys. And also, besides the science, because as I said, I wanted to do something that had two components, we also did outreach. So we used the data that we gathered, and I would enter it, which was, part of the process, and write reports. And then we would go to the community and share that information with them, so they knew how their resources were doing, and if they wanted to protect something in particular, they could. I also got the chance to go to other parts of Belize to do other surveys. We did cleanups. I did a lot of fish dissections. There's a fish called the lionfish that's invasive in Florida too, but in Belize. So we would catch them and see what they were eating. And it was a really great experience. And I guess it's important to point out that it was very, we were out there in the middle of nowhere sometimes. So you had to be okay with, having no water or having no electricity. So one of the trips I did to do surveys, we slept in a tent for a week. So that was really, it's important to think about that when you go into it, if you're okay with those sort of conditions. So after my year in Belize wrapped up, I decided that I wanted to do something that was even more community based, getting to understand the process of how you implement marine policy. Well, not marine policy necessarily, but working with communities to try to protect their resources. So I applied to the Peace Corps in the Philippines, and I got accepted. And well, I moved out there. I had never been to this part of the world before, so it was a really new experience, a little bit intimidating, but I kind of just went for it. So the first month of the first 3 months that I was there, I was just in training with my other batchmates, so other volunteers that had come with me. And we learned the language, we learned about the culture, we learned simple things like how to ride public transportation, because in the Philippines there's probably 5 or 6 ways you can get around. So things that you know how to do here, but you got to learn how to do in another country. And then once I got to my site, I was by myself. I was the only American volunteer there. And I kind of just got to know the community. Basically, this meant doing things like going to fisher folk meetings. Sometimes my office just wanted to go sing videoke, and you went with them because that's how you really got to integrate and know the community and know their needs. And after all this integration, we decided to do habitat assessments and figure out how the resources were doing in our community, because it had been a little over 5 years since they'd been assessed. So basically, I went out and I helped train fisher folk and other community members on how to assess them. So I taught them how to do seagrass, mangrove, and coral reef assessments. And it was a really challenging experience, because not only did we have to figure out all these logistics, we went to 27 different towns to do this, but also we had to teach these surveys, and with my very limited Cebuano, which is the local dialect there, I was trying to explain, okay, so you lay a transect and you look for fish. So it was really cool, but a little bit challenging. And besides that, I also did some other things, like I did a training for teachers about environmental education. That way they could take it to their schools and hopefully start to incorporate it into their programs. We did things like cleanups. I did focus group discussions with fishermen. So a little bit of everything. And as you can tell, most of it wasn't explicitly science. It was mostly just working with the community to assess their resources and figure out ways to protect them. And a huge component of it was just really getting to know the culture, being in a whole new place, all these new things. I went to parades, and I had a local market that I went to, and I got to know the lady there. One of the times, the picture of the guy with the motorcycle in the river, we had to go hand out invitations for one of my trainings, and rather than sending out the invitations like you would here, we had to go house to house. And for this house, we had to cross this river and walk up a mountain and then sit down and chat with this guy. And then this guy went up a coconut tree and got us a coconut. So it was really just a good experience to learn how to integrate and get to know the community, so you could, start to talk about those issues such as conserving your resources. So my time came to a close in the Philippines after a little bit over 2 years. As I said during the questions, I did a little bit of traveling, but then eventually I ended up in Washington, D.C. So one of the things that I think, to be honest, getting a job in marine biology can be hard. It's a very competitive field. I probably applied to 70 or 80 jobs, and I got maybe 2 or 3 interviews. So despite having a lot of experience, it's just really competitive. But I got really lucky, and I ended up in Washington, D.C. And I picked this job, well, because I got an interview, but also because I kind of wanted something a little bit more stable too after a few years. Being in Belize and in the Philippines was amazing, and I would never trade it in, but it doesn't pay really well. And so I wanted a little bit of stability. So I worked there for the Summit Foundation, which was a philanthropy. And basically what we did was we gave grants to organizations. And my program, the one that I worked for, we gave grants to organizations in the Mesoamerican Reef. So organizations that were working to protect the coral reef in Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and Guatemala. So this job basically included a lot of reading, reading grants, learning about the work. I did get to go to 3 of the countries to see what the organizations were doing and get to meet them. And what I really enjoyed about this job was that, well, first of all, I didn't know about this as a career opportunity for a scientist. I had never really thought about working for a philanthropy. I think when I got into science, I thought, gonna be in the field, gonna do research. And I think all these experiences really taught me that you can do so many different things. But the other thing that I really liked about this job was that I got to work with a bunch of different non-governmental organizations. So I got to see what everyone was doing in the region. And it kind of gave me an idea of, oh, maybe I want to do this after, maybe I don't, and then kind of think about what skills I would need and what education I would need to do the job, the work that those organizations are doing. And that's what I've done. So it has been, I put a little map here at the end. I have traveled around, and I just wanted to drive kind of the point home that even though I always knew I wanted to study marine biology, I went into school and I did all this research and work, but when I graduated, I was unsure of what I wanted to do after. So I traveled around and I decided to get new experiences just to see what I could end up doing. And that was really beneficial to me because it drove me to where I am today.
That is fantastic. Thank you, Dani. Such amazing adventures that you've had in your life. So I do want to check in with our sites. I know we have a classroom that's shifting out, but we're going to go over to Ms. Catherine's class at Riverview High School in Sarasota, Florida. And we're going to go ahead and take a couple of questions from you all. We do have some questions coming in from the chat as well. So just remind everybody out there who are watching our live streams, be sure to type in your questions to that chat space. So Ms. Catherine, what questions do you have for Dani?
Hi, I have a question. So as a person wanting to be a marine biologist and a person that has a scuba certification, what's the first process or first step you would suggest to get your foot in the door to get studies and get involved?
Great question. So someone who's interested in marine biology, you said you're already scuba certified?
Yes.
You are. Okay. So kind of what are some words of wisdom that you can give, pieces of advice, maybe to go that next step? Because you've already laid a pretty good groundwork there being scuba certified already. And I know that you're taking marine science classes at Riverview High. So Dani, any words of advice?
Yeah, so since you're already certified, what I did, because I was kind of in your same position, is I went straight through and did my dive master right after high school. And then I got a little bit of experience working. I actually was fortunate enough to get a job with the dive company where I did my dive master, and then I did my instructor. But I think the biggest piece of advice would be, try to build your certifications, try to make sure that you have experiences outside of class, so get involved in other things that you might be interested in. And yeah.
That's a great piece of advice. And I know, look to local science centers, local museums, local aquariums and zoos. If they have any sort of volunteer program or teen programs that you can get involved in, that always helps you to get some more experience and kind of start building up your resume. That definitely helps. Because like Dani said you applied to about 70 jobs. Mm-hmm. And you were accepted to about 3 or so. It's tough. And I know when I was graduating, I have a marine science background as well. And when it came time for me to apply for internships, unpaid internships in the marine science field, I applied to 30 and I was awarded 3. So it's a very, very competitive field. But if you're driven, if you start getting experience and start building your resume, Sea Stars to the Stars program that Riverview High has. I'm saying that incorrectly, but the planetarium and field trip programs.
Starfish.
Thank you, Stars to Starfish. Thank you so much. They have a great program right there at your local high school. If you're involved with that, that's awesome, because that is definitely something that can get on your resume. Great question. All right, Ms. Catherine's class, do we have another question?
Yeah. Okay, what's the scariest altercation you've ever had on the dive?
What's the scariest situation you've had on a dive?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good question.
Scariest situation on a dive. I'm trying to think. I mean, I try to be safe. I guess one time I was leading a diver and he was low on air, and then he kind of started to swim into a wreck. And that was scary to me because I knew he was low on air, and you also shouldn't swim into environments where you can't see above you. So I just sat there for a little bit, and he eventually came out, and we made it back up to the surface fine. But it was a little bit nerve-wracking for me because I was leading him and in charge, and I was making sure he would be okay after.
Wow. We have a question coming in from the chat, and I do believe this actually came from Miss Catherine's class, but this is a wonderful time to bring it up. So here at EarthEcho, we believe that you can act now for a sustainable future. So we've learned about your adventures. We've learned that you yourself have learned that if you work with communities, yes, you can do the research, but if you're not working with local communities to maybe communicate the importance of what you're researching and you're finding, it kind of falls on deaf ears and really no action can be taken. So with that in mind, working towards a sustainable future, what advice could you give to, say, a high school classroom to help to save the oceans? What would be one of your key take-home messages?
So in regard to that, I think about this a lot because it sometimes, as much as you work with community, you still need other things to help, you need policy. So I think one of the most important things would be, knowing about what your local government is doing, showing up to hearings if they're trying to pass some sort of environmental law, and making sure that your voice is heard, because politicians do listen. So it's important to get involved in that process and kind of, put pressure on them to save our environment, because at the end of the day, we need it to survive. So that's something that I've gotten into a lot recently too, is being more involved in the political process, because I like working with communities, and I think that's really important. But I think we also need that, those laws in place to make sure that people are held accountable. So just making sure you do that. And then also just communicating with people, teaching, your parents, your friends, etc., about all these things that they can do to be, let's say, environmentally friendly.
Absolutely. That's great. And we're going to come back to Riverview High School for some more questions, but we do have some questions coming in from our chat feeds. So this one is, do you know what your research will be on in Hawaii, and who are your current advisors? And then I have a follow-up question to that.
Okay, so I only have one advisor right now because I just started, so I haven't figured out who else I'll be working with yet, but his name's Mark Hickson, and he does coral reef fish ecology work. Right now, what I am planning on doing is looking at the effects of an invasive fish here on the coral reef. So about 50 years ago, the Department of, I think, Aquatic Resources decided to introduce this species of grouper to create a new fisheries, but no one ended up fishing it because they get ciguatera poisoning here. So basically fish poisoning. So I want to, and the populations exploded because no one's catching them. So I want to see what sort of effects they're having on the reef in terms of, are they eating local fish? Are they affecting the behavior of local fish? So that's the plan for now.
Excellent. And then the follow-up question to that is, what do you plan on doing after you achieve your PhD?
Wow, yeah. So I have also been thinking about that a lot. And I think what I really want to do is probably work for some sort of advocacy organization. So while I was working in the philanthropy, I got acquainted with an organization called Oceana, and they do work with policy and advocacy. And I was really interested because they really push for, for change. And I really want to be part of that process. So now I'm trying to get involved with other NGOs here that do those sort of things so I can develop the skills and I can go into it and be a scientist that's informed about the topics and can help create policy and push for it.
Awesome.
So that's the goal.
And one of EarthEcho's founders, Alexandra Cousteau, works very closely with Oceana, in fact.
Nice.
So that's perfect tie-in.
Yeah.
All right, Riverview High School. Katrin, do we have another question for Danny?
Yes. What declines in coral reefs have you seen over the years?
Oh, good one. What declines in the coral reefs have you seen over the years?
A lot of declines. It's actually, whenever I get the chance to go somewhere, I make sure I get in the water, because we've seen them transform so fast. I know in Florida, for example, there's a disease going around for coral that's killing them really, really fast. It's a disease that just attacks the tissue of the coral, and within weeks they die, and they've decimated a lot of the population. So disease has been one of the things I've seen a lot of. Storms will come through and just rip everything up. And of course, bleaching, I've just diving here, Hawaii is going through a bleaching event right now. So a lot of the corals are turning white and may potentially end up dying. And you see these sites that used to be really beautiful and have all this coral just end up being rubble because the reefs end up dying.
Great question. All right, Miss Katrin's class, do we have one more question?
We got it right here. Go, Jackson.
How easy would it be to get into the research of sharks?
Good question. How easy or how difficult could it be to get into shark research?
Yeah, it is pretty difficult, to be honest with you. Shark research, I think, is one of the more competitive of the research fields, and I think I got lucky because at the time when I applied to be part of the shark research lab, it was a little bit newer. But I know that at least with that lab, it's become very competitive. And I know when I was looking for research, I definitely also was looking into shark research, but all the labs were full. And I mean, it's really hard. And that's why, again, I stress how important it is to just make sure you have opportunities outside the classroom and other things, so even if you want to do research and you can't get into a lab, try to do something similar that could help you develop the skills that could be transferable to shark research. So things like, boat skills and animal handling skills. So yeah, it is very difficult. So you got to make yourself really competitive and try to do a lot of things outside the classroom that will set you apart from everyone else.
So I think this is perfect timing. What are some last pieces of advice or words of wisdom that you can give any students that wanted to pursue a career in marine science? Or any career, really. These are great words of wisdom. So
yeah, I was thinking, I was looking for pictures for the presentation. These were kind of the things that popped up as I looked through through what I had done. One of the things is just make sure you surround yourself with people that really help you grow. I've been really lucky to have a lot of, powerful, or not powerful, but influential scientists and divers in my life that really helped me develop my skills and pushed me to go out of my comfort zone, try new things, and learn. This is probably kind of cheesy, but just nothing's impossible. Every time I got into these new opportunities, I was always impressed. I was like, oh man, I didn't know I could do this. So things are possible, and sometimes it may be harder to do it, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. And as I said before, it's okay not to know what you want to do. Take time to explore it. Don't lock yourself into something without being 100% sure. Try to, dip your feet into different jobs and different opportunities just to see what it is that makes you excited. If you get the chance to live abroad and work abroad, I know this is a harder one, but there are programs out there that let you do that, and it makes you a lot more flexible and allows you to see new points of view. And then this is kind of a technical one, but have people read and edit your work. I'm applying to fellowships now too, and grants, and it's important to see other people to read what you're doing.
Excellent. Great pieces of advice. So thank you so much, Danny. And everyone out there, you can keep in touch with Dani, follow along on her adventures. Here's some of her social media handles. She was even nice enough to share her email with us. So Dan, I can't thank you enough. This was absolutely wonderful. I think you have such great advice for students out there who even for careers in general, but marine science in particular, but such wonderful adventures. And thank you for sharing those with us this morning. And I do also want to thank everyone out there for tuning in live. I want to especially thank our STEMExplore partner sites and especially Riverview High School for joining us today. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you. Now, EarthEcho does have some exciting events coming up. STEMExplore will continue to feature women in STEM careers with our virtual career connections today. We have 2 more programs today, and we also have programs throughout November and throughout December as well. So again, you can visit our website to learn more. You can see our entire lineup, and if you register for the programs, you will have that added bonus of being able to chat our mentor questions. So be sure to stay tuned with EarthEcho International on all of our social media channels, as well as on our website, www.earthecho.org. Thank you again to our wonderful STEMExplore mentor, Daniela Escontrela, and to United Technologies for their tremendous support of STEMExplore programming. So on behalf of EarthEcho International, thank you for joining us, and keep exploring.